Hello and welcome back to another chapter of Charlotte's Web. Today we are reading chapter 14, Dr. Dorian. The next day was Saturday. Fern stood at the kitchen sink drying the breakfast dishes as her mother washed them. Mrs. Arable worked silently. She hoped that Fern would go out and play with the other children instead of heading down for Zuckerman's barn to sit and watch the animals. "Charlotte is the best storyteller I ever heard," said Fern, poking her dish towel into a cereal bowl. "Fern," said her mother sternly, "you must not invent things. You know spiders don't tell stories. Spiders can't talk." "Charlotte can," said Fern. "She doesn't talk very loud, but she does talk." "What kind of a story did she tell?" said Mrs. Arable. "Well," began Fern, "she told us about a cousin of hers who caught a fish in her web. Don't you think that's fascinating?" "Fern, dear, how could a fish get caught in a spider web?" said Mrs. Arable. "You know it couldn't happen. You're making this up." "Oh, it happened all right," said Fern. "Charlotte never fibs. This cousin of hers built a web across the stream, and one day she was hanging around the web when a tiny fish leaped into the air and got tangled in the web. The fish was caught by one fin. And mother, its tail was wildly thrashing and shining in the sun. Can't you just see the web sagging dangerously under the weight of the fish? Charlotte's cousin kept slipping in, dodging out, and she was beaten mercilessly over the head by the wildly thrashing fish, dancing in, dancing out, throwing." "Fern," snapped her mother, "stop it. Stop inventing these wild tales." "I'm not inventing," said Fern. "I'm just telling you the facts." "What finally happened?" said her mother, whose curiosity began to get the better of her. "Well, Charlotte's cousin won. She wrapped up the fish, then she ate him when she got good and ready. Spiders have to eat the same as the rest of us." "I suppose they do," said Mrs. Arable. "Charlotte has another cousin who is a balloonist. She stands on her head, lets out a line, and is carried aloft in the wind. Mother, wouldn't you simply love to do that?" "Yes, I would, come to think of it," said Mrs. Arable. "But Fern, darling, I wish you would go out and play outdoors today instead of going to Uncle Homer's barn. Find some of your playmates and do something nice outdoors. You're spending too much time in that barn. It isn't good for you to be alone so much." "Alone?" said Fern. "Alone? My best friends are in the barn cellar. It's a very sociable place, not very lonely." Fern disappeared for a while, walking down the road to the Zuckermans. Her mother dusted the sitting room, and as she worked, she kept thinking about Fern. It doesn't seem natural for a little girl to be so interested in animals. Finally, Mrs. Arable made up her mind that she would pay a call on old Dr. Dorian and ask his advice. She got in the car and drove to his office in the village. Dr. Dorian had a thick beard. He was glad to see Mrs. Arable and gave her a comfortable chair. "It's about Fern," she said. "Fern spends entirely too much time in the Zuckerman's barn. It doesn't seem normal. She sits on a milk stool in the corner of the barn cellar near the pig pen and watches the animals hour after hour. She just sits and listens." Dr. Dorian leaned back and closed his eyes. "How enchanting," he said. "It must be nice and quiet down there. Homer has some sheep, hasn't he?" "Yes," said Miss Arable. "But it all started with that pig that we let Fern raise on the bottle. She calls him Wilbur. Homer bought the pig, and ever since it left our place, Fern has been going to her uncle's to be near it." "I've been hearing things about that pig," said Dr. Dorian. "They say he's quite a pig." So here's Mrs. Arable talking to Dr. Dorian. And there is Dr. Dorian, listening, leaning back in his chair and listening. "Have you heard about the words that appeared in the spider's web?" said Mrs. Arable. "Yes," replied the doctor. "Well, do you understand it?" "Understand what?" "Do you understand how there could be any writing in a spider's web?" "Oh, no," said Dr. Dorian, "I don't understand it. But for that matter, I don't understand how a spider learned to spin a web in the first place. When the words appeared, everyone said they were a miracle, but nobody pointed out that the web itself is a miracle." "What's miraculous about a spider's web?" said Mrs. Arable. I don't see why you say a spider web is a miracle. It's just a web. Well, have you ever tried to spin a web? Asked Dr. Dorian. Mrs. Arable shifted uneasily. Well, no, but I can crochet a doily and I can knit a sock. Well, sure, said the doctor. Somebody taught you, didn't they? My mother taught me. Well, who taught a spider? A young spider knows how to spin a web without any instructions from anybody. Don't you regard that as a miracle? Well, I suppose so, said Mrs. Arable. I never looked at it that way before. Still, I don't understand how those words got in the web. I don't understand it, and I don't like what I can't understand. None of us do, said Dr. Dorian. I'm a doctor. Doctors are supposed to understand everything, but I don't understand everything, and I don't intend to let it worry me. Mrs. Arable fidgeted. Fern says the animals can talk to each other. Dr. Dorian, do you believe that animals can talk? I never heard one say anything, he said, but that proves nothing. It's quite possible that an animal has spoken civilly to me and I didn't catch a remark because I wasn't paying attention. Children pay better attention than grown-ups. If Fern says that the animals in Zuckerman's barn talk, I'm ready to believe her. Perhaps if people talked less, animals would talk more. People are incessant talkers. I can give you my word on that. Well, I feel better about Fern, said Mrs. Arable. You don't think I need to worry about her, do you? Does she look well? Asked the doctor. Oh, yes. Is her appetite good? She's always hungry. Does she sleep well at night? Oh, yes. Then don't worry, said the doctor. Do you think she'll ever start thinking about something besides pigs and sheep and geese and spiders? How old is Fern? She's 8. Well, said Dr. Dorian, I think she will always love animals, but I doubt that she'll spend her entire life in Homer Zuckerman's barn cellar. How about the boys? Does she know any boys? Well, she knows Henry Fussy, said Mrs. Arable. Dr. Dorian closed his eyes. Henry Fussy. Remarkable. I don't think you have anything to worry about. Let Fern associate with her friends in the barn if she wants to. I would say offhand that spiders and pigs are fully as interesting as Henry Fussy. Yet I predict that a day will come when even Henry will drop some chance remark that catches Fern's attention. It's amazing how children change from year to year. How's Avery? He asked, opening his eyes. Oh, Avery. Avery is always fine. Of course, he gets into the poison ivy and he gets stung by wasps and bees and brings frogs and snakes home and breaks everything he lays his hand on. He's fine. Good, said the doctor. Mrs. Arable said goodbye and thanked Dr. Dorian very much for his advice. She felt greatly relieved. That, my friend, is the end of chapter 14. I'll meet you back again for chapter 15. Bye-bye.